Okay, hi everyone. Yes, tonight we're looking at the Manson case through an MKUltra lens. Was Tex Watson's sudden collapse in California induced, not natural? We'll start with Dr. Jolyon West, who he was and the tools he used, isolation, hypnosis and strong drugs. So they talk about in Subproject 43, that we'll talk about. When then we'll walk the timeline of Tex. He was fine when in Texas, suddenly mute and not eating in LA, and compare these methods to Tex's symptoms and quick recovery. And we'll stick to the psych reports, the court records, and declassified files. And if you passionately believe Tex was faking, I hear you. Please listen to the whole presentation before dismissing what I'm saying. There you go. And with that said, yeah, greet everyone. Sorry. I don't normally do scripted parts, but yeah, for a stream like that, you need something at the beginning. But yeah, that's it. We're talking about Jolyon West and what jumped out at me from Texas psychiatry report and what probably happened. Different take on how other people approach the MKUltra aspect of the Manson case. But yeah, I hope people will find it interesting at least, and yeah, at least listen to what I have to say before they just say, "Oh no, Tex was just faking his mental illness anyway." Yeah. Because yeah, okay, I know I've heard that. Yeah, a lot of people just believe he was faking his mental illness. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Ellen Mark's arrived. Capone's here this week as well. I think Dawn's probably ill. She hasn't picked up her messages for a couple of days. But yeah. Yeah, I'll get started pretty quickly. Just give people a couple of minutes to arrive. Because I scheduled this wrong. I'll make sure there's chapters. Yeah. MKUltra gave you chlamydia. Yeah. The toilet seat. Well, yeah, I'll start getting into it pretty quickly. So we've got something to talk about anyway. Well, first of all, I'll show you. This is the actual MKUltra document. But I'm not going to read this out just because, yeah, I'll give you a sort of summary of it, and I'll make this available. This is from the Black Vault. Yeah, what does he say? Psychophysiological studies of hypnosis and suggestibility. Research proposal submitted to and it's redacted, but yeah, it's confirmed in books like Poisoner in Chief that this is Jolyon West. They just redacted his name, and he worked at Oakland University at the time, I think. But yeah, this is what he was proposing, and I'm just going to give you a summary of it because that's easier than reading it out and then trying to translate it for you. But if you want to look at the document, I'll make it available in my groups, and you can find it on the Black Vault. And yeah, the rest of it is that there's a lot of stuff about how the funding of it and all that. Yeah, the funding of the subproject. But yeah, I'm going to just read you a summary of it rather than boring you with the actual language used. Right. So Jolyon West, MKUltra and Subproject 43 in about 1955 this was done. The goal was to discover how to change or erase a person's memories, personality and behavior using drugs, hypnosis and controlled environments. Hypnosis experiments, and test drugs that make hypnosis easier and deeper and others that block hypnosis entirely, then study how that affects what people will do or reveal. And sensory isolation, use specially designed rooms where light, sound and temperature are totally controlled to break down normal thinking and increase suggestibility. And dissociative states, learn how to cause amnesia, mutism, not speaking, and trance-like unresponsiveness, and how to switch people in and out of these states. And a special chamber, he proposes having a special control chamber built to manipulate every environmental factor while monitoring the subject with polygraph, EEG, and other real-time recordings. So you'd be all wired up while you're in this control chamber as well. And secrecy, hide the project's real purpose by operating under a fake name so participants don't know what's really being tested. And also there's a point when there's a memo to stop sending correspondence to a certain address and that, where they're trying to obviously it gets even more secretive through the project. And if this level of mind control research was already happening in the 1950s, imagine how much more sophisticated and secretive it could have been by 1970-71, when Tex Watson arrived in California, late 70. And West's covert research in hypnosis and sensory isolation and drug-induced dissociation was already fully operational 15 years before Tex's breakdown. Right, and Jolyon West, and this is just a couple of the public cases that he's involved with. Jack Ruby, he declared Jack Ruby mentally ill after shooting Lee Harvey Oswald. And there's lots and lots of speculation about him having caused Jack Ruby's psychosis and, stitching up Jack Ruby, basically. And Patty Hearst, he consulted on her alleged brainwashing after her kidnapping. And the Jonestown survivors, he worked with the survivors after the massacre. And he was just generally a cult expert. In the 80s, he did lots of lectures about cult deprogramming people. So it's really odd that one of the most studied psychiatrists in America was somehow invisible in this case, where his skill set fits perfectly. And he was based at UCLA during the Manson trial era. He specialized in drug-induced dissociation, hypnosis, and amnesia, symptoms Tex Watson suddenly developed. Yet no public connection to the case. It raises the question, was his role here kept secret because he was part of the cover-up? Was whatever he did integral to covering up what really happened? Right. And West's covert MKUltra research shows he could induce dissociation and amnesia, control environmental and sensory input, and use drugs to deepen or block hypnotic states. Tex Watson, within days of arriving in California, suddenly stopped speaking, refused food, though he also had dramatically lost weight since his arrest, and he became catatonic and at some points had to be restrained. Went so crazy violent he had to be restrained. So the overlap is hard to ignore. And what if Tex was just faking? Some say Tex was malingering, faking illness to avoid trial. But the timeline tells a different story. If this were an act, why wait until California? His own girlfriend described him as completely normal before his arrest in Texas. In jail, there was no hint of psychosis. In Texas, he appeared coherent, engaged, and maybe poised to turn on Manson and maybe talk about his Hollywood connections. Later in California, he stopped speaking, refused food, became catatonic, and had to be restrained at points. And meanwhile, Jolyon West's covert MKUltra research demonstrates he could induce dissociation and amnesia, and manipulate environmental inputs and sensory input, and intensify or inhibit hypnotic states using drugs. Even if you're skeptical, the sudden change and parallels are too striking to ignore. Yes, because if Tex was planning to fake insanity, why did he wait until 2 days into California to start acting crazy? He acted absolutely normal in Texas. We'll get more into this as well because the organic brain syndrome doesn't make sense. Because there's a statement, everyone has heard this statement from the girl who he went out on a date with while he was back in Texas after the murders. And she describes him as quite normal, and they smoked weed together. The most interesting thing she says was that when she had sex with him, he was more animalistic about it because she had had sex with him before he had left for California as well. But yeah, she talks. There's the most complete version of her interview is what's in the psychiatry report, I think, but I've seen it on cielodrive.com as well. But that girlfriend in Texas said that he seemed normal, and all the time he was in jail in Texas, he was talking normally and was normal. If he was faking it, why did he wait so long to start faking it? Right, yeah, and this is where I get into a presentation, so I'll just break for a discussion. Yeah, because I'm going to present it to you as if it's a study I was writing, sort of thing. Though this would never could never seriously be published because the subproject is not evidence that they achieved that. It's just showing that that's what he proposed. It's not evidence that he was able to do that. That's the thing, you know. But yeah, it's just speculation. Yeah. That's it. Learn new tricks from Linda Kay, probably. But it was also all the girls. He talks about going to orgies with all the girls in his psychiatry report. And also he was off with Dean Morehouse doing God knows what. He hung around with the Golden Penetrators before Manson was even there. So yeah, he was up to all sorts, wasn't he? Definitely would have become more experienced when he was in California than he had been back in Texas. Yeah. Yeah, well, this is it. People find it easy to accept that he did something to Jack Ruby. What I'm proposing is not, it doesn't make Tex any less accountable for his crimes. It doesn't make him innocent. What I'm proposing is, like, we'll get to it when I read out the study. You'll see exactly what I propose. He was, it looks induced. When I laid out the evidence as well, it surprised me actually how plausible it looks. I thought it would be easy to debunk and everyone would just laugh, but it actually looks surprisingly plausible when you lay it all out. One of the letters from Jolly to Gottlieb, it's the leader of the CIA, says that he had perfected the technology to erase and replace memories. Yes, that's it. So there is evidence that he did achieve it, but generally they want you to think, oh no, they didn't actually achieve all these things, that they were going for. It all failed. But yeah, do you believe that? Do you think by 1970, 71 they had perfected the techniques even better than when they did whatever they did to Jack Ruby? That's what I'm proposing, sort of thing. Yeah, wait a sec. When I get into it, I'll show you exactly because there's a certain day when his behaviour changes. I'll just get into it. Right. Induced dissociative amnesia in Charles Tex Watson, a case of forensic memory manipulation. If this were presented in a forensic psychology journal, it might read something like this. Right, so the hypothesis is Tex Watson's post-extradition psychosis was not spontaneous mental illness, but a deliberately induced dissociative state orchestrated using psychological and pharmacological techniques consistent with the known toolkit of Dr. Louis Jolyon West to erase memory and install a trial-ready narrative. And the null hypothesis, so if I'm wrong, Tex Watson's post-extradition breakdown was a natural progression of an underlying mental illness such as schizophrenia or organic brain syndrome caused by chronic drug abuse, as originally suggested by court-appointed psychiatrists. His mutism, catatonia, and amnesia were the spontaneous result of this neurological deterioration, with no external interference or manipulation involved. Operational definitions. Dissociative amnesia. Inability to recall important autobiographical information, typically of a traumatic or stressful nature, inconsistent with ordinary forgetting. Chemical dissociation. Dissociative state induced by drugs, e.g. scopolamine, PCP, or LSD. Forensic memory manipulation. The alteration, erasure, or implantation of memories in a subject during criminal proceedings. So method of the case presentation. So the trigger event is the extradition to California, September 1971. Timeline of deterioration and sudden recovery. September the 11th, 1970, Tex Watson is extradited to California. September 12th, 1970, trial begins. He's speaking normally and Watson denies any illness. September the 18th, so the next time they're in court, he stands mute in court and begins refusing to eat. On September the 25th, 1970, he exhibits abnormal behavior in prison, self-harm gestures, placed in full restraints, first severe behavioral collapse and restraints, possible window for covert drug administration. And then September the 30th, 1970, reported as violent and disoriented. And then October the 2nd to the 14th, 1970, weight documented at 118 pounds. Alternates between mutism, erratic behavior, exposing himself, and refusing food. Yeah, seriously, it says he did that. Well, it's masturbating when he knows he was on suicide watch. And so he knows they were having to look into his cell, and they asked him to put his pants back on, but he didn't. He just grinned at them. That's what's meant by that. Mid-October 1970, he was transferred to Atascadero State Hospital. And within 48 hours, he resumes communication, eating, and displays full awareness. A dramatic turnaround. March the 1st, 1971, Watson's trial resumes and he is speaking again in court. This marks his total recovery, approximately 4 months after his transfer to Atascadero. So apparently once he gets to Atascadero, he recovers really quickly, but they still keep him at Atascadero for about 4 months. This is consistent with reports from Texas. Watson's girlfriend at the time stated he seemed completely normal before his arrest. While jailed in Texas, he reportedly showed no psychiatric symptoms. If he had intended to feign insanity, we would expect signs of that plan to appear earlier. Instead, the opposite is true. He denied illness and spoke normally on the first day of his trial. It suggests that his condition deteriorated rapidly after that appearance, possibly because authorities feared he would reveal inconvenient truths in court. The drugging may have begun in subtle form, on or just after the 12th, with a dramatic escalation marked by his self-harming behaviour and use of restraints on September the 25th, because he goes mute in court and stands grinning at the guy talking to him and won't speak. And then by September the 25th, he goes absolutely batshit and has to be restrained in prison. Right, his transfer to Atascadero and multiple trips to UCLA in the weeks that followed. Yes, because they kept taking him to UCLA as well. That's the other weird thing that followed may represent not a therapeutic recovery, but a memory erasure and reprogramming phase, the installation of the official narrative he would later adopt. Watson's refusal to eat once he got back to California may also have reflected a fear that his food was being drugged or tampered with, a common reaction among patients experiencing induced dissociation, or among those with reason to distrust their captors. This fear may have been grounded in reality, because former family member Barbara Hoyt was drugged with a hamburger laced with LSD in an attempt to silence her testimony. Watson could have learned of this and feared he might be targeted in a similar way, because that happened on the 9th of September, so just before the 12th. If it was reported in the press or it got through the prison grapevine, he could have heard about that. And also, notorious prisoners get their food tampered with. People urinate in their food or put glass in their food or whatever. They can't eat anything that isn't from a sealed package sometimes. So it could have been for that reason he wasn't eating. Right, September the 25th, 1970 appears to be the critical turning point in Watson's mental collapse. This is the first documented instance of severe behavioral dysregulation, self-harm gestures and restraint, strongly suggesting a possible window of drug administration. Given his concurrent food refusal, one hypothesis is that Watson feared his food was being tampered with, consistent with paranoid reactions or actual covert sedation. On September the 28th, 1970, court transcripts show Watson staring silently at the judge, failing to answer even direct questions about the legal representation. One of his lawyers had just withdrawn. The judge noted Watson was staring intently in the court's direction, but said nothing. This confirms a pattern. His most extreme psychological shutdowns occurred at high-pressure procedural moments, suggesting either trauma response or outside manipulation. Right, and yeah, I wanted to show you these pictures because this is really striking. Look, right, look at when he's arrested. Look at the size of him. He actually was quite fat when he was arrested. And then you see this is what he looks like the day he's extradited to California. So he had already lost a lot of weight before he even came to California. And then you see him in 1971 when he's fully recovered, basically. So Watson's weight loss and food refusal between 1969 and 1971. In Texas, so December 69 to September 70, he looked and acted normal. Photo shows he's already getting thinner before extradition. He mostly ate safe, sealed food, e.g. cottage cheese his mother brought in. He says that with the psychiatrist at one point when he was in Texas, his mother brought him in food. Arrival in LA, September 70, he stops talking and refuses most food. Jail doctors note a major weight drop down to 118 pounds at about 6 foot. He's put on tube feeding at points because he won't eat. Atascadero State Hospital, late 70s, early 71, eating improves under supervision, described as spoon-fed, not tube-fed there, and weight begins to stabilize. So he didn't recover that quickly. He still had to be spoon-fed for a while at Atascadero, apparently. And why this matters, the timing is tight. Serious food refusal starts as soon as he reaches California. That lines up with a fear-based avoidance pattern, not ordinary illness. And is it a reasonable fear? Because days before his extradition, the Barbara Hoyt LSD burger incident was making the rounds, the 9th of September. So it's plausible Tex avoided anything unsealed or not from family because he thought the food could be drugged. But was it actually? Yes, and this is the restraints, the type of restraints he would have been placed in when he's put in restraints on the 28th. And the head and neck systems, that looks really particularly disturbing, doesn't it? But that must have meant when he was tied down to the bed like that, he was still shaking his head around, so they had to employ this extra bit, the head and neck systems. And so what we're proposing that we did to him is was done to him by Jolyon West. The memory booby-trap technique. West methods could not only erase memories, but also lock them away. Under drugs like scopolamine, LSD, or PCP derivatives, The subject could be restrained and placed under hypnosis, conditioned with the suggestion that remembering or speaking about certain events would trigger intense pain, terror, or physical collapse, and be bombarded with disturbing images and sounds or plunged into total sensory darkness. And this fear-linked conditioning makes the memory itself a source of trauma, discouraging any recall. Because they couldn't just wipe his memory. If they just gave him ECT and wiped all his memory and he suddenly can't even recognize his mum and dad and stuff like that, that's going to look suspicious, isn't it? So they had to intervene, and whatever it is. So the motivations for intervention. So Watson had no ideological loyalty to Manson. He wasn't going to protect Manson. If you don't believe that, because obviously we've all been sold the story that he was a robotic servant of Manson and he loved Charles Manson. But look at the actual events that occurred. They didn't even like each other that much, right? He had no loyalty to Manson. He would have spun on Manson and told the truth, I think. And he possessed knowledge of drug trafficking, biker connections, and Terry Melcher. He lived with Terry Melcher before Manson and the family even arrived there, and he was involved with Dean Morehouse, Ruth Ann Morehouse's father. And he posed risk of testifying to inconvenient truths. Silencing text kept the Helter Skelter narrative intact and other motives buried. Right, yeah, just more background to Jolyon West, basically. Background: the West Protocol, precedent for induced amnesia and memory manipulation. Much of the following is documented in the book Poisoner in Chief by Stephen Kinzer, which details West's research under MKUltra and outlines the scope of his work in memory manipulation and induced psychosis. West's direct involvement in experiments with hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and dissociative drugs makes it clear that the state had both the tools and the precedent to perform the kind of psychological intervention described in this study. From the 1950s onwards, psychiatrist Dr. Louis Jolyon West conducted a series of government-funded studies exploring how memory, identity, and behavior could be manipulated through drugs, hypnosis, and sensory deprivation. These experiments were often carried out under the umbrella of CIA Project MKUltra and were aimed at producing pseudo-psychosis, drug-induced states mimicking mental illness. Key findings from West's published work and declassified experiments include memory erasure and substitution. Subjects under hypnosis or drug influence, LSD, scopolamine, mescaline, could be made to forget real events and recall fictional ones. Drug-induced dissociation. Schizophrenia-like states could be pharmacologically induced, making them indistinguishable from organic psychosis in some cases. Sensory deprivation as a blank slate. Sensory isolation was shown to erode ego function, making subjects more suggestible. Military and forensic applications. West proposed these techniques for use on prisoners and suspects to erase memories or install narratives. These findings align closely with the symptoms observed in Tex Watson: mutism, catatonia, amnesia, and sudden recovery. While no official record links West to Watson, the tools required were readily available to California state psychiatrists at the time. They've been studying it since the 1950s. And so it didn't even have to be Jolyon West himself that did it at this point. Anyone could use the toolkit that they had already, you know. So the results or evidence summary. The timeline correlation between location change and onset of symptoms. Symptoms match documented results from West behavioral experiments. There's no consistent diagnosis from California psychiatrists. It fits an induced state better than chronic illness. No record of West's involvement, but his methods match Watson's symptomology. A textbook case: sudden onset, matched symptoms, abrupt full recovery. Exactly what West covert protocols were designed to produce. Right, and the discussion, right? Schizophrenia typically emerges gradually. Anorganic brain syndrome doesn't resolve abruptly, nor does schizophrenia. The timing and nature of Watson's breakdown suggest an external cause, suggests a case of forensic psychological tampering consistent with state interest and capabilities. So in conclusion, this case study supports the hypothesis that Charles Tex Watson's breakdown was not spontaneous, but strategically induced, using known psychological tools, likely for the purpose of neutralizing a witness and controlling courtroom narrative. So yes, so what I'm basically saying is it doesn't look like, to me, he suddenly started faking insanity, or he decided to go for the insanity defense on the 12th of September. It looks like he was drugged again. Or they started drugging him again around that time, and they tinkered with his memory, basically. That's all I'm proposing. And yes, he probably was going to go for the insanity defense anyway, wasn't he? I'm just saying the way he suddenly, and look at the restraints they put him in, right? They don't chain you down to the bed like that if you're just malingering, right? He must have been seriously trying to harm himself. He must have been smashing himself against the walls and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? He wasn't faking there. I think he was given something like scopolamine again, because they knew about what they were calling belladonna was actually what we now know as datura or Jimson weed, so much stronger. They already knew he'd had a bad reaction to that family of drugs they called the nightshade family, and they had scopolamine. So I think they gave him something like scopolamine, and that is what caused him to flip out like that. And then while he was in that state, they can just come in and instill whatever they want. It's disturbing, but like I say, when you lay it out like that, I was shocked by how plausible it actually sounds. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it, isn't he? Yes. It does sound very. When you look at it like this, it is very similar to what happened to Jack Ruby. And everyone says, "Oh, he would just wanted to fake insanity to avoid responsibility for the crimes," but he never denied the murders. And I think they were scared he was going to talk, because Bobby was loyal to the 1%, and the girls were totally loyal to Manson. Everyone else they could manipulate because they were like 1%ers. But Tex wasn't. Tex was just an arsehole who seemed to hang around with drug dealers and blag their drugs off them, from what I can see of the timeline of what he was actually doing there. Do you know what I mean? I don't think he had any loyalty to the 1% or anything like that. I think he would have sold everyone out. And they were scared of that because they were scared of what had happened with Terry Melcher coming out, and it coming out so soon after their deaths, what the people at CI Drive had been up to, basically. So they don't seem to have made that much effort to really cover that up, the amount that was talked about in the press, really, if you look into it. And that is horrible. And I don't like discussing all those rumors, really. But fucking, it's relevant. This is what people were saying at the time. People that knew the victims as well, not just strangers and not just the press. These accounts come from people that actually knew them. Yeah. I mean, the state. Yeah, the state. MKUltra thing. No, but the state was scared. There was a huge cover up, obviously, wasn't there? They had to cover up what Terry Melcher had been doing. That's what we've been getting at for a long time. And the involvement of drugs. So now, with all the press coverage, I can see that it actually got at the time the drug angle of this. I don't think they were really trying to repress the drug angle that much. And they knew Watson was going to go for the insanity defense because of drugs anyway, so they weren't bothering, really. But they didn't want it coming out that it was to do with dealing as well so soon after the murders, because people would lose sympathy for the victims, wouldn't they, obviously? And obviously the Terry Melcher stuff was going to ruin a lot of people, wasn't it? A lot of people's careers. That would be a huge scandal. And what would it have done to Doris Day? She had also just had the shock of finding out that her husband for years had embezzled all her money and left her with tax debt and all this. What would her son being exposed for all that at the same time have done to her? Yeah. Yeah, well, that's it. I think that as well, and I think Tex is key to this. I think Tex actually knew more about the weird shit in Hollywood than Manson did, because people were freaked out by Manson. He found it hard to get in places, but Tex was likable and friendly, and he did get in places. I think Tex actually knows far more about people's dirty secrets than, or did, if Jolyon West didn't wipe it all or make him so terrified to recall it that he has a nervous breakdown or whatever every time it's mentioned. Yeah. And this is it, yeah. And Doris Day says in her own biography that nothing could be further from the truth, the way she was uh, portrayed, like a virgin and all this sort of thing, yeah. Yeah, and that's it. Folger's dad wouldn't have wanted it coming out, the men she'd been involved with just before she died as well. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, yeah. Well, it can be quite a lonely thing to be into, kind of, yeah, alternative narratives of the Manson case, because a lot of people don't get why it's important to us as well, do they? They think it's just weird. Why are we looking at these old murders that happened years ago? But it's so obvious that there was some kind of cover up, and the society believed it for years. You know, if they could cover this up, what else is a cover up? That's why it's important to expose all these sorts of things, isn't it? And look at how they did it, innit? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's it. He sold wigs, sold drugs, trafficked humans. He knew Melcher, Wilson, and Dean Morehouse before he knew Manson. Innit? That's the thing. Like I say, I've done other streams about Charles Watson. Did Charles Watson have his own game? And there's the really kind of far out hypothesis that he was involved with bikers, and him and Joe Dorgan, who is Rosemary LaBianca's daughter's boyfriend, were trying to overthrow drug dealers, and that's what the murders were all really about. They were trying to take over the drug market in LA. But yeah, even the guy that proposes it sort of says he doesn't even believe it. It's just a hypothesis. But yeah, what was Tex really up to? Yeah, and I don't think that he had any loyalty to the criminal underworld either. I think he would have just talked, and that's what they were scared, innit? Yeah. Yeah, well, that's it. Anyone who knew Dean Morehouse knew about the trafficking, didn't they? Yeah, and Ruth Ann. And I'm sure I read somewhere Tex said that he thought that Charlie was worried Dean Morehouse was going to try and steal the girls. So that's what Dean Morehouse was the same as Charlie. You know, he was taking these girls and he wasn't just preaching to them, he was pimping them out as well, you know. Basically, is what that means, isn't it? If Tex said that. Yeah. So wasn't Jack already dying of cancer when he shot? If it, you know, if he really fucking did, if it really was him. But there's actually a fucking picture of him doing it and everything, though. The whole thing is so crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Oh my god, yeah. But wasn't he already dying of cancer when he did it? And that's a suspicious thing. It's like they, you know, they programmed some dude that was already dying, so he was going to die before he could even be tried anyway. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, hi there. As well. Talking of Cary Grant, Scotty Bowers was a lover to Cary Grant and J. Edgar Hoover. Yeah, I'll probably do a poll to ask what people want to hear about because whilst looking into Cary Grant's biography, there is a biography of Cary Grant that talks about this rumor of him being at the guest house. And there's a couple of other interesting things in Cary Grant's biography that are relevant that I could talk about. But I also found, whilst looking for stuff about Cary Grant, a part of Warren Beatty's biography where he talks in depth about Roman and Sharon's relationship, or it talks about it and stuff like that, and what was going on at the house. And also, there's another account of the Doyle incident that's slightly different to others, but that names a police officer who's supposed to have known about it as well. So I do a poll. What do you want me to talk about first? Cary Grant, or what Warren Beatty said about the situation at CLO Drive and Roman and Sharon's relationship. And there's quotes from a few other movie stars about the way Roman treated Sharon and that. It's quite shocking, actually. Yeah, oh, horrible. Oh god, yeah. And that's what what I was looking at in Warren Beatty's biography implies as well. Just everyone at CLO Drive. That was what CLO Drive had become. And there was a club called the Daisy. Nicholas mentions this in the Manson Club, but they all went to the Daisy as well. All these pervy people, this was where they went to pick people up. This place called the Daisy. It was all the people that went to that place, and it was just some kind of kinky sex house for years. Really, CLO Drive. No, but it's pleasurable for a man, James, as well. If that's the thing, he just cared about pleasure. I don't think he really loved men or anything like that. You still can't believe that Dennis would have sex with a man. But there's a lot of pleasure to be had out of it if that's all you fucking care about as well. That was all he cared about, I think. Not. I don't think he was gay and loved the man or whatever. Though they are supposed to have been close, him and Charlie, aren't they? That's the rumor that he and Charlie were in love with each other. That's the crazy thing. Oh yeah, but yeah, there's a new account of the Doiling, but I think Warren Beatty, the stuff from Warren Beatty's biography is more uh crazy than what it says, because there's only a little bit in Cary Grant's biography as well, and most of it people know, because everyone knows it's quite widely talked about that Cary Grant had LSD therapy, but he knew Timothy Leary and all this sort of stuff. But there's more accounts of him getting picked up by the police for picking up young boys and accidentally giving them an improper suggestion and they weren't a rent boy, so that he got reported to the police and stuff like that. Sort of yikes situations. And if he was at the guest house for William Garrettson with William Garrettson, it wasn't, to give him lessons or anything, was it, that late at night? Huh. Sorry, just look at the chat for a second. Sorry, I just got to look at what people were saying in the chat. Cut these long pauses out in the edit. Yeah, well, when I read his testimony out, there's a bit where he gets questioned about all the young men that have lived at his guest house, Manson's lawyer, and it seems to be, loads and loads of young men, basically, and they all sound European and sort of Swedish sounding or whatever, so you get the impression they're like young, fit, blonde men sort of thing. So it does seem quite suspicious. It wasn't just Garrettson, there was a huge succession of young men that had lived there. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. You drank where the Rat Pack did. Wow. Yeah, sorry, I've got to smoke. Stressed me out doing this stream. I really didn't want to do it, but I know the people who do want to hear it, I wanted you to hear it anyway. But I know most people are just going to dismiss everything. Like, oh, he was just faking his illness anyway. Okay, whatever. I'm just saying it is plausible, and if you can accept or handle thinking that they were able to do that to Jack Ruby, why not Charles Watson as well? And it explains, because I've always thought he looks off. There's something off about him, like the lights are on but no one's home. His eyes aren't. There's no, and he does a good job of acting. His facial expressions, his face moves, but his eyes don't ever react. And he looks scared. Cary Grant worked as an escort for Scotty Bowers. Because I didn't realise as well how old Cary Grant was in the 60s. Because when I was looking into him and his relationship with his wife at the time, he's actually a lot older as well. He looked like he was in his fucking 50s. But I know people looked older then, didn't they? Their haircuts made them look older. Maybe he wasn't quite that old. But yeah. So whether he was a rent boy, he was probably, people were arranging rent boys for him probably, rather than him being rented out. Maybe when he was young though. Maybe that's part of his history. I'll have to read his book, because there's a biography that got slated by critics because they said it's mean to him. Makes him sound like a monster. And of course, that's the one that talks about the CLA Drive stuff. Mm. 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 Yeah. In the prime of his career in the 40s and 50s, but like I say, it's crazy stuff about what it says about his LSD therapy. I won't spoil it for you. The things he saw in that. I'll have to do a Cary Grant stream. I'll do a poll to see what people say, what people want. But the Warren Beatty stuff is more crazy, so I'll probably end up doing that first. Well, the thing about Hollywood Babylon as well is, he admitted later that he made loads of stuff up in that book. He didn't. He just made it up. It was not fucking real. So what he says, you can't trust it. But maybe when he was younger, but by the 60s he was getting on, wasn't he? But well, a lot of men. There's like a casting couch, isn't there? And Yul Brynner as well. There's a really strong history of Yul Brynner being gay, and there's you can find photos of him totally naked, basically, and shit like that. He was obviously posing for homoerotic photos when he was a younger man as well. And in Magic Christian, he does drag, doesn't he? In Magic Christian, he wasn't just acting. That came natural to him, I think. He had retired from acting by this point. And I saw a picture of him when he was married to the woman he was married to when he had all his LSD therapy and that he was getting on. Yeah, I was only going to cover it. It is. It's a really interesting book, but I know there's he admitted later himself, Kenneth Anger even admitted, because I was going to use it as a source for Fatty Arbuckle stuff, because it says, and there's a picture that says it's the fucking crime scene photo of the bed and stuff like that, but I don't think you can trust anything. I don't think there was a crime scene photo of the bed or anything like that. You know what I mean? You can't trust what he said in there, because he just made stuff up. But I did find another theory about what really happened with the Fatty Arbuckle case as well. I was going to cover that at some point, if people are interested. Oh, the book about Warren Beatty. Let me look. I'll edit the pause out. It's on archive.org, so you can read it for free. I think it's called The Sexiest Man Alive or something like that. Wait a minute. Because he was one of the Playboy tunnels mateys, wasn't he? Or the ones that are supposed to have had Playboy tunnels. If I haven't read the whole book, I just searched it for references to CLO Drive, you know. Oh no, it looks like I didn't bloody favourite it. So I can't tell you right now, but it was called something like The Sexiest Man Alive or something like that. There are quite a few biographies of Warren Beatty, but this one, yeah, I will find it again for the stream. It's on archive.org. And there was, I think, a quote from Douglas, another one of the Playboy dudes, about Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. Well, he's the one who says that, yeah, because there's a quote in it that says people were saying they thought the baby was Jay's. It's the only place I've ever read that actually written in a book. Well, probably the Manson file, he says it as well. Not many places do they say that. And it's mentioned, yeah, that Filmways were complaining that Roman was filming Sharon naked. They didn't like it and stuff like that. I've never heard that before, but apparently Filmways didn't like the fact he was making her do nude stuff. That was the company she was contracted with. Yeah. Oh God, no. No, I don't think he was sexy at all. Yeah. He obviously thought he was very sexy though, didn't he? Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it. Because if Cary Grant really was there when parents showed up, it was to see Cary Grant, not sell him a car radio, wasn't it? You know. So what the hell was really going on? We'll never know the truth, I don't think, but it is, yeah. But it does, doesn't it? Because I was thinking that. Well, if Cary Grant was really there, yeah. Yeah, I'm glad I got that out of the way anyway. And for the people that do want to hear it, yeah, I hope that it was clear for you. Exactly what I'm proposing. Because, yeah, people have never look at, yeah, what happened, after, during the trial. But if you look at what other things Jolyon West is supposed to have done, it's people after trial, while they're in trial, not before. And when he was looking at the Jonestown survivors and that, he was probably doing research. He was probably gathering information from them, wasn't he? You know. I want to know what he did in Vietnam as well. Apparently, he went out to Vietnam at one point. Is that when the Jacob's Ladder drug got tested on whatever? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's it. If he was so sexy, why did he need? Yeah, yeah. The tunnel to the Playboy Mansion. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. God, sorry, just staring at the chat. Yeah, that's it. If it is about him, yeah, but people assume, yeah, it's about him, don't they? You're so vain, yeah. And there's the clip of him on the Graham Norton show getting asked about having a tunnel, and he looks a bit disturbed for a minute, doesn't he? Yeah, it's quite funny. Hmm. But yeah, it's all. That's what the rumours are all basically about. Yeah, illicit films getting made at CLA Drive. And people weren't happy about it, and like I say, this biography confirms a few different people actually what they said. Or gives names. Actually gives names. It's less vague. So I'll definitely read that out at some point. Hmm. Yeah, well, this is the thing, isn't it? I think people go mad with power, and like once you've done everything, what more is there? So this is why they start to get weird. I think, yeah, because they want the next thing, and then it starts to get into forbidden things that you shouldn't do. But they think they can get away with it because they're rich and powerful, and it looks like they still fucking are, doesn't it? Hmm. Yeah. Well, you're going to meet Stephen K, are you? Really? That would be interesting. I would like to speak to him, yeah, because I think his mind has been turned, hasn't it? Yeah, and he says in that Peacock documentary, he's less supportive of Bugliosi's narrative, isn't he? And he backs up the idea that he thinks that Bugliosi was covering up for Terry Melcher. There's not enough really to talk about the text tapes because that's all there is, isn't it? Really, that's it. Yeah. There's a lawsuit where he tries to get them back. But yeah, no, the LAPD have got them now. After his lawyer died, they were handed over to LAPD, and they have the text tapes. And that's it, really. There's not enough to fill a whole stream to talk about the text tapes. We have nothing else. Hmm. Sorry, just looking at the chat. Oh yeah. Well, when you meet Stephen K, where you dress like Squeaky, yeah, put on a red robe, yeah, yeah. Well, this is it, isn't it? As well, he shows absolute sanity, yeah, in every, and he's not got no signs of dementia or anything. He's been absolutely sane ever since. Never done a foot, never put a foot wrong at all in prison, has he? It's fucking strange. I find the whole thing very weird. I think something happened to him. They did something to him. No, James is on Facebook. He can talk to us on Facebook. If he wants. You're in my group, aren't you, James? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he can talk to us on Facebook. Yeah, I've still got to organise this, trying to contact Tom O'Neill to find out how much he would want for an interview. So to see if we can crowdfund an interview with Tom O'Neill, because I'd like to do that now, to ask him more about what he saw of Bugliosi's notes. Steve Parent, obviously, we all want updates about Stephen Parent, don't we? But yeah, I'd like to hear him talk more about, and also Rudy Outerbelly as well, the stuff Rudy Outerbelly said, because that's interesting too, isn't it? Because yeah, very little known about him. Really, just looks really creepy, doesn't it? And yeah, involved with a lot of women who end up getting raped or die or whatever. Yeah, yeah, that's it. Well, no one actually called him Tex, did they? Everyone called him Charles. That was just something George Spahn called him, apparently. He was known as Charles, wasn't he, to everyone? So it's kind of like we all just call him Tex so that we don't get confused with all the fucking Charleses in this situation. Because there's Charles Watson, Charles Manson, Charles Taco, Charles Winans. If you call everyone Charles, it gets fucking confusing, doesn't it, very quickly? Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah, if we could get Tom and Stephen K at the same time. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Well, this is it, yeah, because the last update on that was the stuff about the pedo priest was that they told him he had to wait 5 years. Then after 5 years, he asked, and they said the rules had changed again, and like, yeah, they still weren't going to give him the information, were they? Which is crazy because they're all dead now. So what are they covering up? That just makes it seem even worse, doesn't it? Unless the records have been destroyed and they don't want to admit they've destroyed records or something like that. Yeah, yeah, this is it. It's how, yeah, because someone he asked for Charles because they knew him as Charles. They didn't know him as Tex, and he ends up getting the phone handed to Charles Manson, doesn't he? And he speaks to Charles Manson instead of Charles Watson. It is very, very confusing. How many Charlies? Yeah. Yeah, generally in the Manson community, when we're talking about it, Charlie means Charles Manson and Tex is Charles Watson. And there's also everyone. Bloody hell. Everyone else that's called Charles. Tackott, Winans. I just refer to them as Tackott and Winans so it doesn't get confusing. It seems to be quite a common name, doesn't it? In America in the 60s. Mm. Well, he's going to have quickly realised it's not Charles Watson, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. But fucking Manson started trying to deal with it, didn't he? Basically, yeah, yeah. You would have known, wasn't it, that it wasn't Charles Watson he was talking to at this point, yeah. But then fucking Tex refused to get up. Did he refuse to even talk to him on the phone? Did Charles Manson just have to handle the whole thing? Because this is what we're told, isn't it? That then him and TJ go round and the whole Bernard Crow shooting unfolds. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. He was allowed to have 4 kids, wasn't he? That seems insane, doesn't it? Yeah. And Charlie, with his jailhouse mentality, took lots of Papa to his word and either considered Crow disrespectful or a threat. Yeah. And also, yeah, Tex published on his website. It was a blog, but at the time the posts weren't staying up. He didn't understand what a blog was, obviously. He was just posting once a month and then it disappeared. But he wrote something about at one point he was in the same prison as Bernard Crow. And he spoke to Bernard Crow, and Bernard Crow forgave him because he'd become a man of God. Which is a crazy story, isn't it, if true? Yeah, well, Doris Tate campaigned for it, didn't she? Yeah. Is it only men as well it was taken away for? I think it's men, isn't it? Only men. Men convicted of murder can no longer get conjugal visits, I think, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Number one cock blocker. If you committed murder and are in prison in California, yeah. But no, good for her, because I think that's obscene as well. You shouldn't have been allowed to bloody. But what can they do? Can they force them to get vasectomies? Like, okay, you're allowed to have sex, but you're not allowed to have children, Does that infringe on their rights too much? Probably, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I'd like to, yeah, hear more about that. Crow's dead though, isn't he? Crow died sometime in the 80s, didn't he? So we can't, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, what do they just, yeah, pass you a cucumber through the bars? There you go, love. Hmm. Yeah. Right, well, this has gone on for 55 minutes now, so I might as well end this and come back and do an after show because we're just rambling now, aren't we, really? But thanks for coming, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation. And yeah, like I say, I've not never been, the point has never been to convince people what to believe. If you still believe he was just faking his mental illness, and I do believe, yes, he was obviously going for the insanity plea, and of course he was going to milk it if the psychiatrists were giving him this. But I'm just saying, the sudden breakdown looks like he was drugged again. It doesn't look like he was faking it. He didn't really fling himself into the wall so much he had to be restrained and have head and neck systems used because he was just faking it. I think he was on belladonna again or whatever, scopolamine. They gave him scopolamine or something, and he started flipping out. That's all I'm saying. And if you don't believe that, fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. He wasn't faking. He got jollied. That's it. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, but thanks for coming anyway, and I'll do an after show if you're still going to be around in about 5 minutes. And yeah, next week I'll probably go for the Warren Beatty thing, but I will do a poll, see what people think. Right. Thanks for coming. Yeah, and like and subscribe obviously as well if you haven't already.